Finally, the last part of this presentation, the results. You might be wondering who actually won the game. Now, I will tell you later. Now, this seminar was about gamification of strategic thinking. And I elaborated a little bit about strategy. What is strategy? According to Wikipedia, strategy is a high-level plan to achieve one or more goals under conditions of uncertainty. And this is actually what really makes Scythe stand out, because it really features this opportunity to achieve one or more goals under conditions of uncertainty. And according to Mintzberg, strategy can be described in 5 different ways. We speak of Mintzberg's 5 P's: strategy as a plan, strategy as a pattern, strategy as position, strategy as a ploy, and strategy as perspective. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, the teams went through several interpretations of strategy and they encountered all of them: strategy as a plan, strategy as a pattern with the benefit of hindsight, positioning on the game board, and also strategy as a ploy. So that was actually nice to observe from a facilitating point of view, that a lot of these interpretations of strategy actually manifested during gameplay. Probably with the benefit of hindsight, also this can be seen by the players. I only met the teams in an asynchronous way in WhatsApp groups and the team leaders in GoToMeetings, and I actually have no idea how they really did synchronize their teams. That was left to them. They used Adobe Connect, they used Steam, they used WhatsApp group calls, anything that goes. In an on-premise seminar with the players and participants of the seminar in face-to-face contact, I would of course elaborated a little bit about different options you could have to use and organize a team. You could use it, organize it in a cross-functional way, or maybe a stovepiped expertise. Every team with 5 players each had, of course, the challenge to organize their own staff work. So how do you organize this workload in a maybe self-synchronizing team with or without a leader, with 5 members, with the tasks of red teaming, strategy development, and strategy implementation? Well, I couldn't actually observe that. I could only observe the results. So I don't know exactly if they made a cross-functional expertise analysis or a stovepipe one, but as you see, there are many subjects that could be covered by subject matter experts, like in the military field, for example, the operational maneuvers around the map. However, you have 4 red teamers in your team and they actually need to know a little bit of all of them to give a sound analysis and prediction of another team's strategy. So you need to be a kind of jack of all trades. One of the very first results the team had to deliver is the SWOT analysis as a sound foundation for any further strategy development. Of course, you need to know your own strengths, your own weaknesses, the possible opportunities the strategic environment offers for you. That would be part of the external analysis of a SWOT analysis. And of course, the threats you might suffer. This is the example of the Nordics team SWOT analysis, which as an observer, as a facilitator, I found was the most comprehensive one, with some unique analysis, even a diplomatic one that they could join with Polonia to rule the seas, because both of these factions have amazing amphibious capabilities. Another result I demanded from the teams was the visualization of the strategy. I demanded several ways to visualize the strategy, the prioritization, pick out the 6 achievements you really want out of 10. But on this Trello board, I demanded the turn sequence and certain specific semantic for making absolutely clear what the turn actually is. And on this specific team board from the Nordics strategy board, in the end, I demanded a self-reflection about the team performance, and they actually put it on the Trello board, which I did not actually mention specifically, but with the benefit of hindsight, would be a great idea for the next iteration, because this is, from a competence-based learning perspective, the reflection phase at the end. So in this column, they really go into deep where they made strategic mistakes, where their plan went off rail, and when they actually need to adapt in an agile way. So very good read, actually. So here we are. In the end, it turned out Nordics won first place with 65 coins. On second place, Crimea. On third place, Rusviet. Fourth place, Polonia. And fifth place, Saxony. To the left, the leadership board I created on Trello, where I had the red teamers of each team being evaluated by one member of my organizational support team. And there is a correlation. So the best team performance was also the team with the best single player red teamers. So this was in a way expected, but also nice that it is actually materialized in real life. But of course, the seminar was not about learning to play the game of Scythe. It was about learning to build a strategy and implement it in an agile way. So there are, of course, these open questions. Did this seminar actually improve long-term planning capabilities? And did it improve the flexibility in the planning process? So was there a kind of strategic mindset built up, or an agile mindset? From an observational point of view, as a facilitator, I think a few of the teams made great progress in these areas. But of course, I don't know exactly what the retention rate of this is, and if there is a transfer of these experiences into other situations. But it could be. What I really think materialized is the importance of these 4C 21st century skills, especially communication. We covered the seminar with surveys, and a lot of them will be evaluated in a separate paper. But all of the teams, or in general, recognize that communication in this specific surroundings was the most important skill after all. But there was also a development. In the end, creativity became more important than in the beginning from the team's point of view. So for the players, I would like to take with you that this resilient mindset, I would like to stress this: to prepare for something, then to detect something in your strategic environment, maybe using the ODA loop. You observe something, you orient, and then you decide and act. And if you got surprised, you need to take a fast recovery, which we will see on another slide. Turn 14 turned out to be the decisive move of the whole game. Crimea surprised everybody. They literally achieved a strategic surprise nobody saw coming. On the left you see the Slack entry of the move, and for Scythe insiders, Crimea just spread out all around the board, covering a lot of hexes in one move, which is from a Scythe perspective a pretty standard move, but nobody actually saw it coming. On the right side I opened a thread for the other red teamers and just asked them short question: did any of the red teamers of the other teams saw this coming? And the answers from Polonia: no, we didn't. Saxony: no, never. Roosevelt: nope. Nordics: no, we neither. And I just congratulated them all for being strategically surprised. So how would you recover from this? Small anecdote, the day before, one of the red teamers of Crimea analyzed that Roosevelt would have the possibility to end the game in turn 15, and they need to score as many points as possible in turn 14, which they did. So they applied red teaming very thoroughly with huge success, and this is a brilliant move who caught everybody by surprise. As a facilitator, I of course hope that the competences and knowledge they were able to gather and to train can be transferred to different areas, and specifically to concepts like strategic balance and security policy, the understanding and especially the feeling of deterrence. So the concept that capability times credibility times communication actually will deter someone or not. And this is a multiplication, and if one of these factors turns 0, then your deterrence is 0. Understanding DIME and security policy. I will actually give a rundown on DIME perspectives of the game in a few slides ahead. And understanding product development, because you have an industrial military complex to run. Understanding computational thinking, because you can of course optimize this production board with a specific algorithm. There is a optimal strategy for the highest return of investment concerning your value chain. However, you need to take into account strategic balance. Maybe you will become very rich, but you might be a very weak and soft target for the competition. Yeah. So let's see if this might actually help for adapting a strategic mindset for life choices. The basic idea is, of course, always think before you act. Let's turn to an example for strategic balance in the game, or to be precise, to a strategic unbalance in the game. Saxony, with the color black, had an encounter, and they choose to pay 2 coins to get 4 food. However, they only had a power level of 1. And Roosevelt just took this opportunity. They identified Saxony as a high value target, which is very, very weak, and they attacked Saxony to get the food, the resources. In game terms, if you look at the right side of the slide, below you have the power track. There is the before and after picture, and Roosevelt with red is on an 8, far to the right, the highest power level in the game at that point, and Saxony is the weakest player. And concerning the game mechanics, an attacker wins in a tie situation. You can only invest 7 powers maximum. That's why the 7 is marked with a red circle on the power track. And you can only play one of your combat cards as ammunition in a combat. And combat cards are distributed on a value from 2 to 5. So theoretically, you can play a maximum of 12, 7 plus 5, with one combat unit. And Saxony, of course, with a power level of 1, could only play 6 in total, 1 plus a combat card of 5. And Roosevelt, of course, can also do math. And as you see above, they invested 4 combat points and combat card with the value of 2 to a total of 6 for a certain decisive victory. And they only dropped back 4 points, and due on the power level and due to another game mechanic, they gained an additional point back. So they are still with power level 5 very competitive concerning the other nations. Polonia in white, Nordics in blue, and Crimea in yellow. So this was a perfect example where another player's weakness was another player's opportunity. Now I will give a short rundown on the dime domains, starting with diplomacy. So actually the game was decided in the diplomatic domain, in the domain of diplomacy. The Nordics realized that Crimea will most probably win the game if being unchallenged after turn 14. And in a huge diplomatic move, they build up an alliance with the other teams just to prevent the team of Crimea, who was from another university, to win the game. So they convinced other teams to do certain sacrifices to, in the end, actually hand the victory to the Nordics. So there were secret agreements that were subsequently disclosed, and from a security point of view, it is of course interesting to observe how important personal contacts, friendship and loyalty between individuals paid out in this domain. In the domain of information, of course, secret diplomacy is also in a way located. There's a kind of gray area between diplomacy and the domain of information. The Crimean team had the best connectivity, and they were really trained to this because they were from the Fernhochschule Hamburg, who is actually very used to distributed learning. So they had a Adobe Connect team room and were really used to work in this environment. So from that point of view, they had a strategic advantage concerning communication and the information realm. This is a gamification seminar, so don't forget the fun. The players pushed their memes in our diplomacy channel, in our public diplomacy channel, but also in a Twitter channel we created on Slack, just to simulate this area and to give them a place to be funny. However, on an abstract level, all these memes could be seen as a kind of influence campaign, as a kind of propaganda. And this meme is really iconic because it encapsulates the idea of building an alliance against Crimea at this decisive point in the game. The last two domains in DIME are military and economics. Now, in the military domain, you cannot win the game of Scythe alone because you can only score 2 achievements, 2 stars out of 6 you need, unless you're Saxony. Saxony has the asymmetric capability to score more than 2 stars during combat situations. So that makes Saxony actually a very huge threat for other factions if Saxony decided to play very aggressively. However, for all the other factions, you cannot win the game only by combat. You need to implement a comprehensive approach. If you look a little bit deeper into the military domain and you consider your operational maneuverment, then the digital version of Scythe proved to be a very important and useful decision support tool, because the Rusviets actually used it, and I provided already a screenshot for it, for making decisions about how they could actually move around the map. And that is, of course, a very interesting approach of using a simulation as a strategic decision support tool in this game. So concerning economics, that is probably in the end the most important domain, because in the end the value of your faction is established by transfer anything you have, any resource, any territorial hex you control into a coin value, and of course stars. And so the optimization of your value chain is of course a very important thing to do, but it's not a trivial task in this VUCA environment, and it requires agile strategy implementation. And the strategic surprise the Crimean team achieved in round 14 surprised all the other teams and was not foreseen by any other red teamers. So afterwards, the diplomatic efforts of the Team Nordics were crucial to bend the game in another direction and snatch victory from the Crimean team in the end. Usually my conceptual framework is low tech plus high concept. And in this scenario, we bought 8 games of Scythe commercially off the shelf for less than 2,000 euros, which is very cheap compared to constructive simulations or other digital equipments. However, we had to shift this on-premise approach to an online facilitated board game. So we had to throw away the low tech in a certain way and implement collaborative Web 2.0 tools that provided the asynchronous and synchronous capability for contact between players. However, Slack as a single point of information, an information hub, was already envisioned from me for maybe a distributed game of Scythe between different universities. So that actually helped a lot, because the whole game would have been documented in Slack anyway. And international professional wargamers would have the capability to observe the game in Slack, and now they could turn to the Slack workspace and re-evaluate the different steps and my results and the whole approach. So by accident, we moved from this prototype, this on-premise pilot, already to the more advanced version I had in mind anyway. But of course, there were certain frictions and trade-offs to be made. One perfect result from the facilitator's point of view was, of course, the usage and implementation of the digital version of Scythe on Steam as a decision support tool, because this whole seminar was placed 3 days before this forum Zukunftsorientierte Steuerung, future-oriented steering, with the sub-heading how to make profound strategic decisions with simulation. And in this case, the Rusviet team, but also other teams, they also used Scythe, but Rusviet provided me with this crucial screenshot they took from their own computer where they evaluated the operational movement capability of one of their units on screen. So this is the perfect example how simulations can be used to make sound strategic decisions. As I already pointed out in my introduction with this quote from Peter Perler, one of the most important things in manual wargame is to ask the right questions and to identify them. Because in the end, perception is everything, and especially for red teamer, you need to have a specific view on another faction to actually identify the opportunities they have from their point to go along a certain attack vector and maybe attack your nation. And you cannot afford to have a strategic blind spot. And so you really need to ask the right questions. And the SWOT analysis is, of course, a very, very basic tool for asking very basic but very important questions. This is a slide in German, obviously, and I have translated it on the next slide. So if you're a German viewer, push the pause button to read it. I will elaborate on this slide on the next slide. So this book, The Digital Education Revolution from 2015, was presented by the author at the Bundeswehr Command and Staff College in 2016. Of course, I took notice of this, recommended it, and one of the basic concepts of the book is the necessity from turning from your IQ, your individual intelligence quotient, to a WEQ. So you need the combinations of experts to actually move ahead. Of course, the basis is knowing knowledge, having facts and figures correct. That is the basis for any reflected thinking. But you need to learn, how to get all these facts into relationship. So this would be, the first part would be the analyzing things, like finding the dots, and learning how to learn is in a way to connect the dots, to build up your knowledge. But the most important thing is, of course, you need to know experts, because this is, of course, crucial now in the information society, where a lot of expertise is actually required to tackle all these very complex or sometimes even wicked problems. So that would be a recommendation. And the seminar, from my point of view, proves that the experts of different various types really worked very well together in the teams to create a great learning experience. My conclusion on wargaming in this seminar. Of course, strategic wargaming with different purposes has great value anyway. In this educational environment, I think 21st century skills could be trained very effectively, and especially the importance of communication and collaboration was stressed. However, if you have a turn-based strategy game over several rounds, you need to run through the decision cycle several times. So these cognitive patterns, like applying the order loop, could be really trained and ingrained due to repetition. Right? So I couldn't really observe this in the teams. A lot of them just muddled through a little bit. I got the notion with the benefit of hindsight, and the order loop was not really embraced that much. The Kanban board was embraced much more, but the order loop is of course difficult to apply if you've never done it and if you're not on premise. On premise, I could have been a more thorough coach on applying the OR loop. And one of the most important things in wargaming is, of course, to repeat a wargame. And the on-premise version would have had 3 runs of this game. The seminar, this online version, only had 1 run of the game. Concerning analytical and synthetic approaches, finding and connecting the dots is, of course, the important thing to do. And I think from an abstract level, the teams did that very well. Conclusion on gamification. Well, gamification works, sometimes with unintended consequences, but it works. And one of the main advantages is the high intrinsic motivation the participants and players have to do their work and even spend extra time on it. And this could be observed by me in the WhatsApp groups. So players spend literally overtime to optimize their strategy. In example, the Crimea team, the red teamer I already mentioned for Rusviet, worked until late in the evening, almost 11 p.m. To make a rundown on the Rusviet strategy and provided thereby the decision support for the Crimean move 15 at the next day. So red teaming was embraced by this team, and they really spend a lot of time on this. And that is, of course, what gamification is all about, that the players really like to do it and spend their time on something that is important and will probably have a much higher retention rate than something that is just forced on them and done only by extrinsic motivation. So in the end, some final thoughts and the promised cat picture. So this is the time to say thank you to my organizational support team. And the players made fun of us because, of course, you can call the organizational team the org team. And this was the meme that was pushed in the tweet channel of the Slack workspace. We did use different methods to calculate and keep track of the game. In the middle, there's a screenshot from a Polonian Scythe calculation app that was provided to us. To the right, my own personal calculations, and we evaluate this in a WhatsApp group chat to really get it right. This was very exciting, a little bit like Eurovision, where all the players waited shivering in anticipation for the results, because literally everybody had different results on the state of the game, which is not entirely surprising, because if you are playing it completely online distributed and you only have high resolution bird view pictures, you overlook sometimes certain details. And it is very easy to overlook certain details in Scythe. And many eyes on the board will guarantee a good quality management, which we achieved in the end. This is the time to say thank you to all the participants in all the teams. I provided a certificate of achievement for each active playing team member. They took part in this collaborative educational experiment, and I certified that they have now foundational knowledge concerning strategy development and strategy implementation, implementing collaborative Web 2.0 tools like Slack and Trello, with a special focus on 21st century skills like communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And combined with this is the basic capability to actually use a commercial off the shelf war game in the context of competence-based training for achieving these certain training results in enhancing 4C 21st century skills, but also in strategy development and strategy implementation. And the full capability would be achieved if they were able to run such a seminar as a facilitator. So on the right you see small feedback from the extensive surveys we did run with all participants, only to take out the results for would they recommend this seminar, and 75% would recommend this seminar with a very sound yes. And would they recommend Scythe as a tool for instructing strategic thinking? And 30% absolutely, 50% yes. So that is a combined 80% approval rate for Scythe as a tool for instruction. So from that point of view, this prototype, this pilot really paid off, and I'm confident that we can implement this maybe on a regular basis in different scenarios with different learning groups. Finally, in the end, the promised picture of a cat. To the right, my cat had her birthday during seminar time, and she is embracing the Eastern Europe landscape, as you see. She has proven to be a menace for the Rus-Viet, Nordic and Polonian land population, pushing the pawns with her paws from the table. I thought the Rus-Viet mech might be the real danger for Eastern Europe, and I pushed the memes, the Mordor related memes in the Slack workspace, but the real danger was of course the Russian blue. So this ends my presentation on my seminar Gamification of Strategic Thinking. Thank you very much for watching, and maybe we can meet again another time to an on-premise seminar at the Bundeswehr Command and Staff College.